Right, ladies and gentlemen, it has gone 6 o'clock, so we will make a start. Welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting. The evacuation procedure at agenda item 1. Everyone present in the room has actually heard the evacuation procedure before, so I don't intend on repeating it word for word, but needless to say, leave the door through the fire exit and congregate outside the old bank on the other side of the road. Agenda item number 2, which is apologies. All of Cabinet are present, so there are none. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations not already printed on the agenda? No? Okay. That moves us to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Is everyone happy that I sign them off as a true and accurate record? Yep. Before I carry on to agenda item number 5, I just want to do a short announcement, which is to thank all of the officers for their sterling hard work and efforts on Monday evening for the Honours Council that we had, honouring and recognising 12 most distinguished members of our community and really showcasing and highlighting the good works that go on in Nuneaton and Bedworth. And it was nice to be able to give them an opportunity to have their moment in the spotlight. And whilst we are all here voting and giving speeches, there is a lot of hard work that goes on behind the scenes. So if you could please minute that, Kelly, and if Brent, you will ensure that is passed on to all members of staff concerned. Agenda item number 5 is public consultation. I'm aware that we have one public speaker, which is Mr. Smith, on agenda item number 6. I will remind all speakers that they should stick to the agenda item under consideration, and if they don't, I will try and draw them back to the agenda item under consideration. So that leads me on to agenda item number 6, which is provision of enforcement agency services for the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council and North Warwickshire Borough Council to include council tax, NNDR and sundry debtors. Councillor Croft. I will second that from the Chair. Mr. Smith, you wish to speak for up to 3 minutes on this item.
It's a veiled threat to the public in this borough, or unlawful threat, bending, breaking legislation, as well as the law. It's an absolute disgrace that you are that arrogant. You think you can demand money from people and threaten to send people to their houses when they can't give it. Yeah, that is the unrivaled arrogance of you lot. Yeah, it's absolutely disgusting. This council clearly cannot be trusted with money. You've sold all the assets. This corporation's been in here 50 years. You've sold all the assets to the borough after you'd stolen them. Pounds worth of debt, and you want more.
Mr. Smith, that isn't on the agenda. Please stick to the agenda item.
The agenda is you are breaking the law, Mr. Wilson. That's the agenda.
Wilson, and no, we
bending
are not
and breaking the law. Let's take your useless paperwork to a real court, not a room you hire. Yeah?
Mr. Smith?
Let's take your useless paperwork to a real court. Either stick to the
agenda item or I will ask you to leave.
You can ask me all you want. I'm asking you to take your useless paperwork
Smith,
and your veiled threats to a real court.
Progress. Councillor Condacor, would you like to speak, as is your custom, as a non-cabinet member?
You won't do it, will you?
Councillor Condacor.
People ain't daft, you know.
Thank you, Chair. Should be looking at in terms of debt enforcement. One of the issues is mentioned here is liability orders, and they can be issued against people who are not particularly well acquainted with all these debt and systems, and then they get charged the charge for there being a liability order. So I think it might be useful having more data in this report in terms of what percentage of our 4.5 million over 5 years is the liability orders, what percentage is the business rates, because the next report is on pink paper, but this report is actually worth a lot more money, £4.5 million that you're trying to collect. And I think we need a lot more information. And there's two aspects. Yeah, are we trying to take money from people who haven't got it and then loading them with lots of charges? Because obviously a lot of people with very little money, the liability orders can cause great problems for us. And on the other hand, because it looks like this contract is effectively, we don't pay them anything, the debt collectors collect it by charging the person who owes them money. Will they give up on some cases that are difficult, but actually the people are, or the businesses have got rich enough to pay? So I'm disappointed this report doesn't really give us any financial information on what the current contract is and how much better or worse, or because quality is really important here, and because it's a zero cost contract to us, it's sometimes a thing we don't actually look at enough. Thank you, Chair.
Any points of clarification? No. I'd just like to emphasise that this is a lawful procedure to take. It happens up and down the country, contrary to some assertions we've had before. But I'd also like to put on record, actually, that our officers do a lot of hard work with residents who are in trouble before it gets to this situation. There are, of course, those who, for want of a better phrase, have ostrich syndrome. They will bury their heads in the sand until the last possible minute. And I cannot emphasise enough, please engage with us at the earliest available opportunity, because if you do that, we are far more likely to be able to help you and work out something to your advantage and meets the council's needs. But we have to remember that this is money ultimately which is owed to the council to help provide the services which residents rely on day in and day out. And those services do have to be paid for. So we have to make sure that we maximise what we get coming in for the benefit of everyone. But there are a number of different things that people can do. There are now breathing space orders where you can get a temporary moratorium on enforcement to give you that time to help out. You can enter into payment plans with council officers and negotiate that with them. And there are other various different things like IVAs out there, administration orders, that sort of thing. So it really is an absolute last resort. We don't want to do this, but we have to safeguard the council's resources, but we want to be as fair to everyone as we possibly can. So, can we move to the vote then? All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 7, which is recommendations from overview and scrutiny panels. There are none. Then we move on to any other items. I've not been made aware of any other items for consideration. That moves me on to exclusion of the public and press. So I will move the exclusion of the public and press as printed on the agenda item for the reasons as stated. Does that receive us? Right. It has been seconded, so yes, you can speak on it, Councillor Condacor. It's unusual, but you're allowed to.
Yeah, I've been sent to 350 businesses, and all the information in there, like our business rates stuff, is all freely available on the valuation site. So I would question the need to hold this in confidential session, particularly because I don't think any piece of it isn't been made available to 350 businesses. And it is a lot of money we're talking about. So I would like the bid talked about in public, and if officers could explain why we need to take it on pink paper, that would be useful.
Back on that. Jonathan?
The reason it was put on pink paper, obviously there has been a lot of consultation with the businesses, as there should be, throughout the process. In terms of the final business plan, there are some amendments within that we've recommended as well, and what have you, and I think it's only right and proper that the final plan that goes out is the correct one, and that it's the businesses who are get to receive that. What we've got to make a decision today is a separate entity, but in terms of this particular plan, it is still open for any amendments. I've got a meeting with the big group tomorrow just to run through, and there were a couple of recommendations there that I might put to them, but what we didn't want them to do was to print them, get them all handed out, and then have to look at, taking those back and making further amendments.
is that what we have before us is a draft, and you don't want people to overly rely on that draft because it could change and it's still subject to some negotiation.
So that it could be considered commercially sensitive as such if there are amendments that we report now before the final draft goes out to the businesses and there are any differences in those two documents.
I am content for it to go into confidential session. I understand the point you're making. It has had a wider distribution than it normally would have done, but given that it is still out there, we don't want people to, for it's still out there to be considered and negotiated on. We don't want people seeing it and relying on it for business decisions as a concrete piece of evidence. So I think in those circumstances it would be reasonable. Did you want to come in on that, Brent?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to put it in very simple terms, it's not for the council to make public a document that has been created by another entity. It is for that entity to decide what the circulation of that document is or it isn't. It's not for us to decide that. So it's confidential to that other entity. That's why we have to keep it commercially confidential here. Put very simply, somebody else's document, we can't make that or put that into the public domain.
Okay. On that basis, I think Cabinet understands the rationale. So I'll move to the vote on the recommendation to go into private session. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that is carried. So we will move into private session. Thank you.